Another movie review. This one is called Holiday Heist, and I came across it on Tubi. Now it's a Christmas-based movie. I'm not a holiday person, but when it comes to a good movie, it's just a good movie. But it's based around the holidays. It is, I guess it's kind of leaned towards a romance drama with a little bit of crime. The crime is kind of soft. People get killed and hurt in the movie, but you don't see the violence. It's sort of like in the backdrop of the movie. So it's a pretty decent movie. It's rated a 5.7 out of 10 on IMDb. But you know, ratings are ratings. It doesn't show the budget, but it's a great camera. There's some great production behind it. So I wouldn't call it low budget. It's just not what we're used to in terms of, you know, big production companies and big name actors. But it's a decent movie. It's played in by Tobias Trevelyan, Shaylee Rose, Lucien Cambrick, and Philip Edward Van Leer. Philip Edward Van Leer, you may know, he's been a well-known actor throughout the 90s and 2000s. These are just not big name, big brick actors, but they did a great job in the movie. But this came out in 2019. I never came across it. I came across it just recently. Decided I would click on it. I'm glad I did. But basically, Tobias, the guy's real name, Tobias is just released from prison, and he's struggling to find a job. It's based in Chicago. Well, they used the Chicago backdrop, so I'm not sure if it was totally filmed here. I couldn't find a whole bunch of, you know, some movies you can find out where it was shot at. I couldn't find any material about where it was shot at. But I do know the backdrop and the B-roll, and they reference Chicago throughout the whole movie. And even in the family home, the B-roll outside of the house says 45 South Michigan, which is right on the south side of Chicago. But you know, sometimes producers and directors and people who shoot these movies, they use the B-roll of a particular property or a city, but it's probably shot on set somewhere else. But this guy in the movie, I think his name is Daryl. He recently gets released from prison, and he was gone a while. He comes back to Chicago, and then the person who he used to work for, who was a sort of like a thief, a gang leader, a henchman, he found out he was back in Chicago. All right, so he sent his goons to come find him and bring him to his lairs, his quarters. And basically, exchange begins of where you been. You know, you've been gone all this time and you didn't check in with me. And the guy's like, hey, I'm out the game. I only came back because this is all I know, but I'm out the thief game. He's a thief. And so he tells him, hey, you know, on the last job we did, I got off because the police didn't have any evidence, and I never dropped your name. I never told anyone. I just took it and ran with it. And I laid low for the last 2 years to make sure you didn't get caught up. I mean, I would say from a street perspective, that should be worth a lot. But the guy, he was like, nah, you owe me. I spent a lot of money building that last job, so you are going to do this job for me. All right. And so he agrees to it. Now, when I was first watching the movie, I'm thinking that this guy's not calculated, because real time, if it were me, and if I knew I was returning to a place where I'm kind of unwanted, I would have slipped in and took some people out. That way they ain't looking for me, and that way it doesn't fall back on me. But this guy was a little bit more calculated than that as I continued to watch the movie. So he agrees to take the job, and basically the job is to hit a jewelry store. Now, he goes to the jewelry store as a shopper, posing as a shopper, and he hears the salesperson, which is the daughter of the owner. He hears the salesperson kind of struggling to do a sale, And the guy was like, nah, I can't afford that. Give me that ring. He steps in. He upsells the guy and is able to sell the more expensive ring. The owner, the father of the jewelry store, hears this and pretty much hires Daryl on the spot. This is part of his being calculated and doing his job. So the job is to rob the jewelry store, but he gets in to work there, right? So the next day he starts on the job. At the same time, the business is in danger of closing because the mother, the wife of the store owner, she passes away and a lot of medical bills had stacked up. So the business is like $75,000 in the hole. So simultaneously, while all this is going on, the son, who's actually smart and he's very tech savvy, he is doing petty thief jobs with the same crime boss that Daryl's tied into. They don't even know it. So he finds out that his father is in a hole with the business, and he starts to go and do jobs, starting to go and break into places and, start to stack some money up. $2,000 here, $5,000 here. He's always sneaking off from school or sneaking off from the family business. So Daryl starts at the jewelry store. They're working. They're starting to pick up on sales. The daughter that works in the jewelry store, her boyfriend is a Chicago police officer, and he doesn't like or not too fond of the new guy that's been around because they're starting to fall for each other a little bit. She understands that this guy that's a police officer, he never has time for her. He's always dipping off. He's always involved in some investigation, and he's kind of standoffish and he's kind of corny, as one of her friends puts it. So as time goes on, the sales start to pick up at the jewelry store. The thief, Daryl, starts to fall for the daughter. Everybody starts to like him. And he's starting to have second thoughts about this jewelry store heist because now he's finally found a home. The backstory is he was raised in the street. His mom and dad were never there. He went from foster home to foster home. So he turned to crime. But this is the first time in his life where he finally has found a home and somebody who's kind of taken him in without question. And one of the people who was instrumental in his teenage years was also a guy who understood precious gems and jewelry and taught him a little bit, which is why he has the gift of gab and knowledge of how to sell jewelry. And so that guy passed away, and then he was back in the street. So now that he's in his jewelry store, this is like his newfound love. Of course, he has a pretty young woman that he's very fond of, and they start to hit it off. So as the movie goes on, the crime boss wants his money, wants his jewels. At the same time, the crime boss is in bed with the Russians, and that's who he's really in debt to. So this is where the movie picks up, and this is where my reservations about him being calculated, how the writers and the creators wrote his savvy, his chess moves, and his calculation into the script. So he does homework on the crime boss and find out he's in bed with the Russians and cuts a deal with them. So as the movie goes on, the father, the business owner, starts to make enough money to pay back the loan that's attached to the business. So they start to hang out more. They start going to dinner with the family. He starts hanging out at their house. Meanwhile, the boyfriend, who's a cop, is growing furious of this. He does a background check on the guy. He comes clean because he was using a different name. They're still unaware that he's a thief. So he's devised a plan to take out the crime boss without getting his hands dirty and remove himself from the equation. Now, while all this is going on, he finds out that the son is also doing stuff with the crime boss, and he devises a plan to get him from under his thumb. So there's a cell phone store robbery that the son's involved in, and that the boyfriend gets wind of because he's a detective, and the jewelry thief hears about this. And so he approaches the son about it. He denies it, and he runs off. So as we're getting towards the end of the movie, he reports back to the crime boss's lair. He tells him, hey, I was able to get the jewels. I robbed the jewelry store. So basically, while they were at a black tie fair, the thief dips off and robs the jewelry store. Now, the anomaly is most jewelry stores that I know in real life, they put their stuff in a safe, but their stuff was left out. He hid it. And so he hid it to make it look real, of course, but he also hid it because he had to. And so he tells the crime boss, hey, I got those jewelries in a safe place. You're going to have to let the kid go. And also, too, this is my last job for you. And so while they're kind of arguing back and forth, the Russians walk in fully loaded. Got everybody at gunpoint. And so the thief cut a deal with the Russians to say, hey, this guy was doing business behind your back, under your nose. Take him out. So he was able to keep the jewelry. That was the deal he cut with the Russians, and get the kid and get all the evidence and dip out. Right. And so the Russians take care of the crime boss, and now the thief is debt free. So he goes back to the family, who's devastated because their business has been hit after getting out of debt and after building it back up. So he comes clean and he tells them, hey, this is who I really am. But he just tells them how much he appreciates them bringing them in. And he ends up getting them the jewelry back and getting them all the stuff to bring the business back. And so in a nutshell, the girl, they have reservations about him, but he could have hit that jewelry store at any time, right? He could have took them out at any time. Why make money for a person that you're going to rob, that you genuinely going to rob? And so they eventually kind of take him back in. The girlfriend, the daughter, dumps the boyfriend, who's a police officer. Right before she dumps him, he solves the case. He solves the cell phone store robbery without implicating the son, and he finds the crime boss and some of the Russians dead because they had a shootout, and then the jury pops back up, right? And so the detective, the police officer, gets on one knee to try to marry the daughter. She declines because truly she wants to start her own business, and she's really in love with the thief. And so they let him back in, and that's the end of the movie. So you guys go watch that. It's on Tubi right now. Like I said, this movie came out in 2019, I believe. But it's a good watch. It's not your typical low budget Tubi movie. I keep telling people that. Tubi has a lot of good stuff. Even your lower tier, lower company movies are still, they have some top tier production. So go watch Holiday Heist 2019 on Tubi. And that's our movie review, First Access TV.